Welcome back. President Cyril Ramaphosa is hopeful that South Africa will soon come off the UK's red travel list. Ramaphosa held talks with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson about the issue. The president said that Johnson understood the situation well, adding that any decision should be backed by science. Earlier this week, scientists and experts from both countries met to discuss this. Let's get the latest from our UK correspondent Olly Barratt, who joins us from London. So, Olly, last night the president actually mentioned this in his address to the nation, saying that Boris Johnson did seem to understand the concerns and that it would be reconsidered in a couple of days.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that this was mentioned in the Downing Street readout of the call as well between Cyril Ramaphosa and Boris Johnson. Clearly, the UK government knows that this is of great importance to South Africa. It's of great importance to people in the travel industry here in the UK as well. It's such an important route between the two countries, and there's been growing pressure here in London on the government to A, explain why South Africa has been on the UK's travel red list for so long, and B, to take it off. And I think the meeting, the phone call between the two leaders, the readout from both leaders and what Cyril Ramaphosa said afterwards, and that meeting between UK and South African scientific officials and the High Commission in South Africa, and the readout after that, the joint statement, all of that point to, I think, a realisation in London now that diplomatically this was becoming a real problem, a real source of anger in South Africa. So a recognition of that, a recognition that it's the right time to listen to the South African side of the argument here. Whether any concrete moves have actually come out of these conversations very much remains to be seen. But here in London, the speculation is that probably next week, towards the end of next week, when we get our next expected update to the travel red list, that South Africa is now in a strong position to come off it.
Yeah, so 10 days I'm reading online it'll take before South Africa officially comes off that list. Why so long?
Well, that's the next review of the UK's travel list. It normally comes a 3-week gap, and on Thursday or Friday sometimes in the week in which it is announced, and that often boils down to how long the meetings take from between officials here in London to work out the data and exactly who should be moving either up or down the lists. The interesting thing about next week is that the designation changes as well. It will no longer be a red list, an amber list and a green list. It'll be just a red list, and then the rest of the world will be considered safe, and people who've been vaccinated in this country will be able to travel to any of those destinations not on the red list and come home without having to quarantine when they return here, and they will also have easier testing requirements too on their return to the UK. And then the question becomes whether the UK, if it does take South Africa off the red list next week, whether it also then recognises the South African vaccination programme and certification of vaccine status too, because what we have at the moment is a situation that some countries are amber or green, and Brits can travel to and back from those countries, but people vaccinated in those countries who are not British citizens can't currently come here in the same way, and that is being thrown up by many countries around the world as really a disadvantageous thing for them, and unfair, they believe, given that often it's the same vaccines that are being used.
Yeah, and I guess even if it is allowed, there's still going to be some precaution, right? You're probably still going to have to get tested before you leave South Africa, and then when you leave London back to South Africa, those measures are probably likely to stay.
Yes. Certainly on return to the UK at the moment, for people who travel to green and amber countries, there are still testing requirements. You also have to fill in a passenger locator form. There's no sign that that's going away anytime soon. And so there will be some of those requirements are easing. For example, PCR tests are moving to a lateral flow test system, which is easier and cheaper for travellers, but there will still be hurdles for people to jump over. There will be extra stress compared to travel in non-COVID-19 times. But going back to where we started, there really has been a growing amount of pressure on the UK government here to really be more conducive to cooperation with South Africa, because there are so many people in this country in the travel industry who rely on that route between the UK and South Africa, and businesses linked to it. And so many people here want to see that route opened up in time for the British winter, so some people can get abroad to South Africa and crucially back again without having to quarantine.
Yeah, all right. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Olly Barratt live in London.